Hello, everyone. And on behalf of UKON Careers, I'd like to welcome you all to our Black History Month event 2020. This event is supported by the Barking and Dagenham Council, and I know that there are a few councillors watching live right now, so welcome. And for those who don't know who I am, my name's Elvie, and I'm a young person from Barking and Dagenham, and I also work part-time for UKON's event team and Converse Dance Crews. I hope you guys are really excited as we have a very, very special guest who will be joining us. But before we get started, we have a few house rules. Just so you guys know that this event is currently streaming on Facebook and YouTube. And during the presentation, you have the opportunity to ask questions to the host. The host is an expert, by the way, and you can do this on Facebook and YouTube. Or if you're brave enough, you can join us on this platform and ask your question personally via the StreamYard link, which is floating somewhere on our social media pages. You're also welcome to leave an anonymous review about the event, and we've all sent you a Survey Monkey questionnaire, so feel free to give us a review of how you found the event and how we can improve it. And just so you guys have a better understanding who UKON Careers is, if you don't know us, we run the annual Barking Carnival event in the borough every summer. And this year we went virtual and it was hosted by Sir Ashley J. And it features some great artists that were locally and internationally. And you can check that out again on our YouTube page. So more onto UKON Careers. We were established in 2014. And UKON Careers is a community interest company that uses carnival arts as a platform to support young people and people just into employment, education, and training. So yeah, isn't that amazing? And most importantly, our aim is to develop a greater understanding and participation in carnival arts. We want to educate people and preserve the tradition of carnival and the history. So let's kick off our Black History Month event. And as mentioned before, we have an amazing guest who has over 15,000 followers. I repeat, 15,000 followers. And in the UK, you only need about a few hundreds to be considered a celebrity. So we have a certified celebrity in the building right now, guys. And also, if you guys didn't know, her page, Know Your Caribbean, has over 58,000 followers. Guys, she is absolutely stunning and absolutely amazing. She knows her stuff. It's the one and only Fiona Compton.
Why are you trying to gas me up so much? Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I need to hire you to introduce me in every talk I have to do because you really hyping me up. But thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor. It's always a pleasure to speak about Carnival, the history of Carnival, the artistry behind it. And this is one of my main focuses because, as part of Black history, there's so much focus on, a lot of the history of our oppression. And I want to kind of talk about the history of our survival, the history of our resilience, and the history of our artistry. So this is what I do. So I'm a cultural and historical ambassador for Caribbean history. Through my art and my filmmaking, it's all surrounding telling our stories. I'm a storyteller, and I like to tell our history or make our history contemporary in how I deliver it. Because I honestly don't think it's not that people don't love our history, it's just how it is being told. And in the same way we try to diversify how we educate people, we have to do that also within our own history. So we have to kind of make it palatable, we have to make it modern, and we have to make it fun too. And I've through Know Your Caribbean, I've been doing that for 3 years, and just seeing how much it has grown from a few hundred followers to 58,000 followers, and lots of big name people also follow the platform, not for me, but for the history. And it shows that we have this connection. We collectively do care, but it's how in which we deliver it. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to dive in. Yeah, you can find, if you definitely want to know about the history, Know Your Caribbean is the place to come in and join. We do webinars, we do events, and I give short palatable bursts of history on a daily basis. So this is where you can find.
We are so excited, and we all welcome you with open arms today. We are so happy you're on board. So Fiona, take it away.
Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome folks to our Black History Month special. And what we want to touch on first is what is Black History Month and why do we do it? Obviously, Black History Month is celebrated every year in October. in the UK. It is also celebrated in the US every February. But it was something that needed to be done because it started off as Negro Day in the US and then Negro Month, and then it extended to Black History Month because they wanted to rename it for it to be something empowering and for people to connect to their history, because obviously within the African and Caribbean diaspora who are living in the US and the UK, obviously our histories have been stripped from us through the slavery, and then we needed an active means to reconnect to that. So it has been celebrated, as you can see, nationwide for the past 40 years. And it has been growing and diversifying. And this is what we want to be doing today, is to make it something fun and engaging for everyone. And for you to walk out feeling like really empowered and much more knowledgeable about certain elements of our history. So we are going to be talking about Carnival. So within Carnival, one of my things is that people kind of reduce Carnival as it being just a 2-day party, a street party where you go and you just drink alcohol and whatever, you dance on girls in costumes, but it's way, way, way more than that. So what we're going to start, and Carnival is something that is very much part of British history. It's a means for us to reconnect to ourselves. It's artistic expression, it's performative art, and there's so much to it behind it, which I'm going to get into in a moment. So we're just going to start off. I'm going to show you guys some footage of Notting Hill Carnival from 1995. So we had a few audio issues, so I'm just going to be like narrating over it. And then we can see Westbourne Park is actually something, a station that's very important in the history of how Carnival developed into how it did. And I'll explain that shortly. But I think it's something very beautiful for us to look at when you see the community coming together. As you can see, it's a mixture of everyone, but it's something that's still very much Caribbean. And even things like steel pan was birthed from, how should I word it? Attempts to remove African identity. So like a brief history of steel pan is that the steel pan was developed when the African drum was banned in Trinidad. And so, the persons of African heritage within Trinidad said, we can't use the African drum. Well, can I use the steel drum instead? And this is how steel pan developed, because we are a people, we love to celebrate, we love joy, we love happiness, we love seasoning our food with love and color. And when you look at our costumes, you can see there's so much of our heritage linked to our costume and our artistry. It's not just dressing pretty and wearing feathers, but we are telling stories through our art. And this is why Carnival is something that's really, really important. So when you wear a costume, you become something, you become a character, and you become a storyteller, you become a performative artist. And, this is why Carnival is something that's really, really integral to, all of the UK. And it's something that I think is a great focus when we look at within Black History Month. So as you can see, it's quite a mix. Everyone's really happy, and this carnival is extremely, extremely important to all of us. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. So in terms of the history of Carnival, in order to understand Carnival in its entirety, we need to go back to the Caribbean, to the 1700s. And they said that historians believe that the first kind of documented celebrations of Carnival started in Trinidad, where the French came across. When we look at the Christian calendar, when we're looking at Easter and Lent and the 40 days of abstinence, before that, just before Lent started, you would abstain Lent was 40 days and 40 nights of abstinence, right? So just before Lent, you would engage in all the sins of the flesh. You drink and you'd party and do all of these things and have a last splurge before you had to abstain for the 40 days and 40 nights. So the French slave owners who came across the Caribbean, they brought across those Catholic Christian beliefs. So even though a lot of historians do say that Trinidad started Carnival with with their Catholic celebrations. There has been documentation of carnival celebrations happening in the Dominican Republic as early as the 1500s, which does make sense because they were one of the earliest colonies in the quote-unquote New World. So, I mean, it's people have varying opinions, but essentially the birth of like modern mainstream carnival in its like fullness did happen in Trinidad. So within that, we need to touch on, you know, life. What was life like for the enslaved on the plantations? So while the slave masters were having their masquerade balls and they're doing their thing and they were drinking and enjoying, you know, the enslaved Africans used to observe this. But one of the things is they had during the period of enslavement, they had different slave laws or slave codes, or in French, they had the Code Noir. So within the Code Noir, Article 16 of the Code Noir, enslaved were banned from joining in groups, from dancing, from singing. You know, their huts would be raided, where they'd burn their musical instruments and so on. So can you imagine how oppressive that was? If we are feeling like we cannot express ourselves through this pandemic, we can't meet up with friends, we can't go dancing, we can't go out. Could you imagine what life was like for them on a daily basis, not being able to have that freedom of expression to sing and dance? So within that, when the enslaved used to see their masters enjoying, they used to mimic that, but also within that, they used to combine their own African culture, their music, their spirituality, and they used to hide it because obviously you would be punished. Within the Code Noir, you would be threatened with death if you were caught doing things like that, okay? So within that, you have to realize that carnival, the fact that carnival exists today for the diaspora is an example of how we still, under the threat of death, still manage to preserve our heritage and our culture through that. And I will expand on that later. So in 1833, we had emancipation, and within that, the enslaved went down to the cane fields and they sang and they danced and they lit their torches and they covered themselves in the molasses, they covered themselves in the very thing that enslaved them, and then they moved in procession. So this is why the procession and the movement of carnival is very important. It's because they did not have the freedom of movement before. So they're celebrating their movement in that way. So, you know, carnival is a celebration of our freedom, as well as it does intermix, you know, these European Catholic traditions and so on. So moving on from that, because when the enslaved were starting to do more and more festivities on the streets, the government was like, we're not comfortable with this. All of these Africans on the street dancing and being what they thought was very vulgar, and they limited it to be just the Monday and Tuesday. And then when we move on, and I'm going to expand on this in a moment, in 1959, the mother of carnival, which is Claudia Jones, she started the first carnival indoor event in the UK in 1959, which has been absolutely instrumental in changing the face of the culture in the UK, which I will touch on in a moment. So this is a really, really beautiful painting from the 1700s in Dominica by Agostino Brunias. And he was an Italian painter who was in the Caribbean at that time, and he documented the enslaved in celebration. So despite the threat of the whip, the threat of death, the burning of your instruments, you know, joy did survive. The enslaved still sang, they still danced, and they still preserved their African heritage through celebration. So, you know, to see these kind of things, it's very rare. And I think, especially when we're looking at Black history, we often share very oppressive imagery of enslaved persons, when in fact they still manage to preserve their joy. So I thought it was really important for me to share this image. So, British Carnival, how did it start? You know, the thing is, when we look at how slavery has been showcased in like Hollywood films, it's very American focused. But within the entire slave trade, it's estimated about 12 million Africans were brought across from Africa to the quote unquote New World. Within that, America only received 4 to 6%. So America got about 300,000 of the NSA that were brought across. And within that, the British Caribbean got about 5 million. Now, the reason why this was so high is because the death rates within the Caribbean were way higher than the US because the conditions were much harder. Because working the sugarcane was extremely, extremely brutal, and death rates exceeded birth rates. So there's a constant influx of Africans coming to the Caribbean because of the high death rates. So because of this is why African culture and spirituality and expression has been preserved way more in the Caribbean, because we constantly had new Africans coming in. They used to call them freshwater Africans. Okay, so yes, it says 2.3 million came to the British Caribbean. But when you look at all, within the French Caribbean, the Spanish Caribbean, the Dutch Caribbean, we have a lot of similarities. We have a lot of we share a lot of the same practices. So it goes to show that something that you may see that's practiced in Jamaica is practiced in Trinidad, but the name is just different. Or something that we do in Dominica is also done in Guadeloupe, but the name is different. So we have a lot of similarities, even if it is not British. But that just goes to show how much our African culture and heritage has been implemented into our what we know now as Caribbean culture. So within that, after emancipation, that was in 1838, we move on through life, and we had World War I, where we had many Caribbean people who were fighters in World War I for Britain, and also for World War II. So after World War II, the state of Britain was in a state of disrepair. They needed help, and this is why they extended the call out to the British colonies to have persons come in to help to rebuild their mother country, because this is what the Caribbean people were taught. We were taught that Britain is our mother country. We growing up, we have the Queen on our money. Sing God Save the Queen, and British culture is very much something that is part of British Caribbean life, especially when you speak to the people from the Winners generation. They look up to Britain. They upheld Britain as their mother country. So therefore, a whole, many thousands came across to England to help to give back to the UK. So within that, moving on, we're going to talk about an amazing woman, Claudia Cumberbatch, or Claudia Jones. So within that, when we start looking at the influx of all of these West Indians coming to Britain, it is a shock to the British community to see so many Black people who are integrating into their community that they're not used to. Because when you look at those who were fighting in World War I and World War II, even though they were fighting for Britain, there was still segregation within the army, and many of them were sent back as soon as the war was over. So to see them being sent back, and then for them to then come back to the UK, those people who were, I guess you could say inherently racist, were not comfortable with having all of these West Indians come to the UK. But the West Indians who did come, came with, such good intentions, because they were taught that Britain is their mother country. So they're just coming back to help mom, So when we look at the main figures within British Caribbean Carnival, Claudia is an amazing pioneer, because she grew up in Trinidad. She moved to the US, and she became an activist from a very, very, very young age. And she was part of the communist community. This made the US government very uncomfortable. But the reason why she had joined the communist community is that she was looking at the disparities in how in which Black people were treated across the different empires, and also within the US. And she felt like communism was a gateway to help Black people out of the oppression from these imperial forces. So America wasn't comfortable with Claudia being a communist, so she was she was deported, and then she moved to the UK. So in the UK, when she moved to the UK, she still continued her activism. She was not essentially a communist during those times, but she was still very much an activist in terms of the empowerment of Black people within the UK and beyond. And this is how she started the West Indian Gazette. And she also worked with Sam King in terms of creating the West Indian Gazette, which was a newspaper geared to empowering Black people in the UK, something that's specifically for them, to empower, to educate, and also to give us a voice. I read that she said that people without a voice are like lambs awaiting to be slaughtered. And this is why she created the West Indian Gazette. So, but also within that, we have to look at the period of time where there's this influx of Black people coming into the UK. You know, the racist community are not comfortable with that. So there's a lot of tension going on within the two communities. And then we have Claudia, who's from Trinidad, where Carnival is something that's very much part of, you know, her culture and her heritage and how we express ourselves, that she felt that she wanted to do something in response to these racial tensions, in order to give ourselves a voice. And this is why she started the first Carnival in 1959. But what she did is that she started this Carnival. It was an indoor event in King's Cross, a town hall in King's Cross. And the reason why it was indoors is because it was winter time. So obviously, can't really have Carnival outside. So during that time of year, so this is what she did it indoors. But it was an extreme success. And, you know, even within that, even with her Carnival, even though it was a Carnival event, she still had activism interweaved into that event, because she was selling the pamphlets for the Carnival event, and she used the proceeds to pay for the fines for the young both Black and white people who were fined by the police during the race riots that was happening in West London. So within Carnival, what we have to also realize is that this is how we express ourselves. This is how we do our political and social commentary. This is how we, as I said, we tell our stories. And this is one example of how Claudia used Carnival as a means to give us a voice, but also to help the community, to those who were fighting racism. So when we look at Ron Laslett was a woman who started the Carnival, the Notting Hill Fair. So Ron was a community worker who lived in West London, and she also noted and was very much aware of the racial tension, and she wanted to do something to bring the community together, and that's how she started the Notting Hill Fair. So the Notting Hill Fair was not a carnival, because it was mixed with, they had persons from Ireland, persons from Portugal, persons from Brazil, and also persons from the Caribbean within her event. For Claudia's own was strictly a Caribbean themed event, but Ron mixed in different cultures from across her neighborhood, because where she lived, there were people from everywhere. And within that, she had a young Trinidadian pan man come and play the steel pan, and he started a procession. So this is how Ron's Notting Hill Fair developed into a carnival of movement and procession, when she had the involvement of the pan man to be into her event. So this is how, so there's been many conflicting suggestions as who did Carnival first, but you know, I think we have to give both of these women their respect, because they were doing their activism through this community work, and they created something. And I don't think it really matters who did it first. I think the fact is that the intention is the same. Sam King is also another great figure that we should pay attention to. Sam King also co-founded Notting Hill Carnival. He became the first Black mayor. So what happened is that Sam King was one of the fighters, as you can see his photograph on the bottom. He fought in World War II in the RAF. And he went back to Jamaica after the war, because like, as I explained, a lot of the West Indians who fought in the wars were just told to just go back home. They are demobilized and sent back to their countries after they had finished serving. And he could not find much work in Jamaica. And he saw the Windrush call, and he decided to take the Windrush and come back. And he was working as a postman for 34 years. He was very active in the community. He was part of the West Indian Gazette. And then through his community work, he ended up becoming the first Black mayor in London, which is absolutely incredible. So these three figures are people that we do have to pay homage to and say thank you to for bringing Carnival into the UK. So we're going to just have a look at a video here. Oh, sorry, let's go back. So as you can see, this is the Empire Windrush. So as the archival footage says, it was a call out to bring people to help to build back the UK after the war. So within that, there was so much racial tension that was happening in Notting Hill. Notting Hill is obviously a very affluent community right now, but in the 1950s and 60s, it was a very poor area. And this is where many of the West Indians who came from the Windrush moved to. So within that, when we look at certain things like steel pan, when we look at calypso, all of these things are political and social commentary and a response to essentially racism. So this is how we protest. This is how we share our joy. This is how we tell our stories. The fact is that if the African drum was banned and then we created something as amazing as steel pan, where we have all of these amazing orchestras, this is a really great insight into how we use our innovation from protest. So also when we look at Carnival and our Carnival costumes, I'm going to touch on momentarily and how in which we have taken derivatives of different cultures and made something our own, but it's always in terms of political and social commentary. So I'm just gonna, next slide. So how other cultures feed into Carnival. So if we look on your right, to the right, where we can see the masked characters that look very Venetian, we do have a traditional character that's normally you see in Trinidad, which is called Dame Lorraine, which looks very, very similar to this. If you look back in terms of Victorian and Georgian dress, where they have the exaggerated bust and then exaggerated behinds, and the women are masked, you will find it with the Dame Lorraines in Trinidad. And that is how the enslaved would mimic their masters, but also in a way of storytelling. So a lot of our within our Carnival, it's mimicry, it is African spirituality, and it's things intentionally done to offend and to shock the public, and I will explain that shortly. Also within, as I've mentioned a few times, is that you can find a lot of our African heritage within that, from the Black Indians, the Moko Jumbies, and the Jab Jab, which I will show you shortly. One of the things that is not mentioned often is the Asian influence into our Carnival. When we look at post-emancipation, so when the African enslavement ended, the sugar industry was still something that needed to be continued. So the British did put a call out and sent to have indentured laborers come in from India and go to the various colonies across the Caribbean. So within that, Trinidad received over 100,000 persons. Guyana, believe received more. So did Jamaica, St. Lucia, Grenada, and across the Caribbean received an influx of indentured laborers from India. So they brought in their own cultures, their own customs. Here's a fun fact. It is actually the Indian indentured laborers who brought marijuana to the Caribbean. So people associated with Rastafarianism, but it was actually the indentured laborers from India who brought it in and introduced it to the Caribbean. They also introduced things like curry. So you have curry goat and you have roti and pilau rice. That is from the Asian influence. So Also, so you can find Asian influence within our carnival as well with the whip masters. The whip masters, they wear very intricate costumes. They also partake in very strict rituals. So they on the lead up to carnival, they bathe in a special herbal bath. They abstain from alcohol and sex. They're not allowed to dance with other women. And they dress up in very, very intricate and detailed costumes that have little mirrors on them so they reflect light, and they have these whips. And the whips are an example of is telling the story of colonialism and how both the Asian and African workers on the plantations were whipped. And so the whip masters became experts in how they used to manipulate and maneuver the whips, and they would fight each other. And that is something that you'd find within the Asian community, especially in Trinidad. So here's an example of a Moko Jumbi. Moko Jumbi is a stilt walker. You will find still walkers in Carnival all over the place. This is a very beautiful example. They don't all look like this because they will adopt different characters. But the fact is a Moko Jumbi is someone that you see on stilts. So Moko is a word that comes from Central Africa, which means healer, and Jumbi means spirit, so it means spirit healer. So the story behind the Moko Jumbis is that they are the spirits that accompany the slave ships across the Atlantic to protect their people. They're also the village lookouts. They're also the village protectors. So this is why they have these long legs. So within that, you will find the Moko Jumbis dressed in different ways, but collectively, this is what they signify. They're the ones here to protect us, and they protected our ancestors as they crossed the Atlantic in the slave ships. So one of the things I really wanted to touch on is what we call dirty mass, or jab. Well, no, jab is a part of dirty mass, forgive me. For those who may have gone to Carnival up here for Notting Hill on a Sunday, and you will see people covered in paint and powder and chocolate and this black oil, and you're wondering why. Well, I will explain. So remember when I said that when the enslaved found out that they were emancipated, they went down to the cane fields and they sang and they danced and they drummed and they covered themselves in the molasses, the very thing that enslaved them, and they covered themselves, and then they moved in procession. So this is how dirty mass. So dirty mass. So mass is short for masquerade. So dirty masquerade. This is how dirty mass started, and it developed into other things. So when you look at jab, so jab means devil in French. So as you can see, you find them with they're wearing horns and so on. This is something you find more specifically in Grenada. So when you look at these dirty masqueraders, you can see the gentleman on the left. He has the chains and the padlocks wrapped around him, and that is very intentional, because how it developed from molasses into black oil, because for jab is speaking about the spirit of your enslaved ancestors who died during slavery. There's also a version called Jab Molassi, which means the molasses devil. So this is the spirit of an enslaved person who fell into a vat of boiling hot molasses and has come back to haunt their slave masters. Okay, so the use of the black oil is very intentional. You say, I am black. Well, I am black. I am going to make myself black. I'm showing you I am black. Okay, so I am this devil. I'm here to taunt you. So this is why you can see this guy. If you look, I think I'm not too sure what he has in his mouth, but when you look at a lot of people with jab, they may have a raw octopus or a raw fish in their mouth, or they do something to intentionally offend, to shock, because they're doing that to offend the onlookers. So when the enslaved were able to take to the streets, to sing, to dance, and to do the things that was called vulgar by the Europeans, because they had that freedom to do it, they're going to exaggerate it and do it even more so. So you call me black, well, look, I'm black, and I'm going to wear the chains, and I'm a devil, I'm taunting you, and I'm going to dance in a certain way that you consider as offensive, but we just see it as expressive. So within Dirty Mask, we have Jab, where you see the characters with the black oil. You also find us covered in very beautiful, colorful paint, or sometimes you see us covered in different colored powder. And within that, the powder is something that you find also in Asian culture, which is the Holi festival. So therefore, you can also, that's another example of how the Asian influence has come into our carnival, and we have made it into something that is our own. So Dirty Mask is extremely important. Dirty Mask precedes what we call Pretty Mask or Pretty Masquerade. So when you see all the girls in the little costumes looking all amazing with the feathers and the beads, that always has to come after Dirty Mask. So you spend day one in the very early hours of the morning. We call it Jouvet. Jouvet means daybreak or the opening of the day. So you start in the middle of the night, and everyone is collectively in communion like this. In this way, we are all dirty, and we become these nameless, faceless, unidentifiable, but in commune together, doing this thing as we celebrate our ancestors and our freedom. And one of the most freeing things about Dirty Mask is that because everyone looks, as you can say, like a mess, it's one of the most freest moments you may ever experience, because you're not too worried about taking selfies. You're not too worried about what you look like or what anyone else looks like. We all look the same, and we're all here to do this one thing, which is to enjoy, not to pose for Instagram or anything like that. And that's where so many people find themselves. Many people find themselves and their true expression by participating in Carnival and not thinking about what they look like, but they are focused on their expression. And that is one of the most beautiful things about Carnival. So this is why I always encourage people to participate, not just in the pretty part, but in the dirty part as well, because it's one of the most important parts of our Carnival and our expression. So moving on. Within that, we also have our traditional mask characters. So we have Camboulet. Camboulet is something that happened in Trinidad. So when, I spoke about the enslaved going down to the fields and covering themselves in molasses. With that, one of the things that used to annoy the enslaved, okay, imagine this. Imagine you're sleeping from a really long day and working on the field, and the conch shell blows, tell you that the cane field is on fire. All right, the cane field is on fire, and you have to wake up from your sleep to go and try and put out the fire to save the very thing that enslaves you. So the enslaved used to just, kind of like take a long time, or they very reluctantly go down to try and save the cane field. And this started this thing that they call Camboulet, which means burnt cane. So when the sorry, my throat's a bit dry. When emancipation happened, the enslaved, like I said, were taken to the streets. They were dancing, they were singing, they were doing their thing, and they tried to ban it because they just felt like it was just too much, and that's what started the Camboulet riots. And then that's when, for a period of time within Trinidad, everything was entirely banned. Like I was saying, the drum, dancing in the streets. So once again, it was an attempt to remove African expression and so on. So yes, the British soon sought to stop the festival, and the enslaved rebelled, but still Carnival did continue. But within that, within Camboulet and everything else, we have our traditional costumes. So you guys now know, okay, you guys are Carnival experts now, all right? So we have Dirty Mask, we have Pretty Mask, but we also have traditional mask. So if you look at within these pictures here, these are some of the examples of our traditional mask costumes, and you can see the similarities between that and West African masquerade like that. If you look at specifically Igbo masquerade from Nigeria, and also other masquerades from Ghana, like from the Ashanti region, you will find masquerade costumes looking exactly like this. So this is where you can find the preservations of African heritage, especially within our traditional masquerade. But also, as I said, when I was talking about jab and doing things to purposely offend the European upper class gentry who were enslaving you all of this time, and now you have the freedom to do what you want. This is why traditional mask is also very, very important, because within the traditional mask costumes, we are telling a story as well. We are also doing, like I said, social and political commentary. We are speaking out about our oppression. We do it in a very witty way. We do it in a very, that's why when you listen to things like Calypso, especially older Calypso, it's using double meanings, it's using very witty language, but we are speaking out against certain injustices within our community. And so even though we don't have slavery anymore, you will still find within Calypso, and you'll still find traditional masks still in existence, where they speak about contemporary injustices as well as past injustices. So every derivative of Carnival, we are telling a story, and it is social and political commentary. So within that, so if you look, you can see the Dame Lorraine's there. So you can see the ladies in the green and orange up top. That is an example of the Dame Lorraine in Trinidad. And then we can also see some of the modern day costumes, where you can see the feathers, and you can see what we call the Pai Banan. We have the Red Indians, and you can see all the cultural elements combined together in modern day costumes as well as within our traditional masks. So Carnival has so much influence from all over the world and has influenced the world. So we can find this, as it says, because of all of the culture, it has influenced the Carnival we know today. Notting Hill, for example, is a really great example of how cultures have collectively combined all over. So now you know the history of how Caribbean Carnival was the foundation stemmed from European Lent, the European Lent calendar, and so on. But then also how the enslaved use it as a means to preserve and to survive, for their spiritual survival. As I said, can you imagine if we are sad now that we cannot go to the club or go to the pub, all these kind of things? Imagine what life was like. And this is why Carnival, our drumming, our singing, our dancing, our expression was a means of how the enslaved survived. To keep their spirits alive, they had to do that. It was necessary. So this is why Carnival is extremely, extremely important. We are soon going to get ready for Q&A. Please have your questions ready. I know I have been zooming through a lot. So we're going to start question Q&A in 5 minutes. So when we look at within all the other derivatives within our culture, so you would find our Calypso music that I touched on, Chutney Soca. Chutney Soca is another example of the Asian influence into Carnival, where it's a mixture of tassa drums and a very Asian sound that has been incorporated into Calypso and Soca music. So within our dance, whining. Now, whining is something that I'm very protective of. It is often very misconstrued and very over-sexualized by those who don't understand what it is, for especially those from the outside looking in, or those who did not grow up within the culture. Whining is something, it's an African expression. Whining is something that's very sensual and is not essentially sexual. And I think, you know, the way the world is developing and growing, and many things are becoming sexualized, including our whining. So one of the things is that, you know, when I go back and I read a lot of the descriptions of how enslaved used to dance on the plantations, they're called lewd, they're called vulgar, they're called demonic, and so on. But it was just African expression. It was not that, but it was something that Europeans were not comfortable with. So it's often demonized. But this is how Africans would express themselves. Okay, so whining is something that is that, and I just want, you know, persons to kind of recognize that it's not about sexualizing a woman is our sensual but also spiritual expression. And I really I could do a whole workshop on wine and why it should be upheld and protected and not be reduced into something that how it has been portrayed in the media. So, fete means a party. So if a Caribbean person says, let's go to a fete, that's we're going to a party. Things like pilau is something that is really amazing. It's an amazing dish, and does come from the African and Creole traditions of caramelizing the sugar and how we use sugar to make lots and lots of amazing dishes. When you look at a lot of Caribbean dishes, you will find that we use sugar in loads of creative ways, like in pilau, like how we do some of our punches and so on. But that's another workshop for another day. Yeah, we have great instruments like the tabu, the bamboo, which is another means of how we used to preserve our drumming when the African drum was banned. So I'm 2 minutes early. So if we have any questions, we are here. The entire team is here to answer any questions. And I hope you enjoyed falling down this rabbit hole of carnival knowledge. So we can go over so you guys know about traditional masks in terms of how we use it as a means to show our African heritage, our political and social commentary, how it is that how we speak out against injustices within our society. That is one of the foundations of traditional masks. Then we have dirty masks. You guys know about that one. And then we have pretty masks. So pretty masks is where you see all the feathers and the beads and so on. But it's also, it developed over time. The feathers came primarily from Brazil. Is a very Brazilian thing. When you look at early depictions of Caribbean carnival, we did not have that kind of feathered pretty mask. So this is an example of globalization. But that in itself, we tell stories. Either I'm an Amazonian bird, and it's a beautiful feeling also because you become a character. And I just really, once again, want to encourage persons not just to spectate carnival, but to participate. Instead of coming to consume something, why don't you become something? Why don't you add to this thing? Become the art, become the dance, become the performance. And that is something that is indescribable. And I would just love to encourage you guys to come and take part. I'm sure you can speak to Ross and all the guys in UKON to help you join in. And I am ready for any questions. So, trying to see. Okay. What is my favorite Caribbean dish? Ooh. Too many to name. Oh my, green fig and saltfish. I think green fig and saltfish with a side of fried plantain. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. What other words were influenced by other cultures that we now use in the carnival scene? I mean, the thing is, there's so many. Like, you know, I did do a video on Know Your Caribbean. I'm happy to share it. Where things like obia is an African word. Bomboclat comes from Angola. Part of it is from Angola. There's so many. There's so many. There's red eye. Red eye is something that comes from Africa as well. Tabanka obviously is an Asian word. You know, even the words like kalalu. You know, so there are loads and loads of them. Do you have any more questions? I could just stay here and run my mouth, you know. I think within Carnival in the UK, there are so many bands that you could join. Even if you are a newbie and you don't feel too comfortable with like going full 100 with like a costume or so on, you can also join a t-shirt band where you're just wearing like literally a t-shirt. But I think it's really more about being part of the community and being on the road together with other people, and you sing together, you dance together, and it's a completely different experience from being on the side of the road and observing it. So I really just like to encourage persons to join in with other bands. UKON can definitely help you all, point you in the right direction. And why listen, officially flexitarians, why you you're making it? Okay, I will someone asked me this and I did answer it in the best way possible. I am St. Lucian, so I will have my own bias, but also as a Caribbean historian, I have to be real. So if you within Trinidad is the biggest Caribbean carnival. So if you want to have from all the different fetes, as you all know what fete means party. If you want to have all this, there's so many variations of the fetes in Trinidad. There's some that are really huge. There's some that are all inclusive, where you get, kind of first class experience. And, they have the carnival. The carnival itself is really, really big. And they also have a mix of, which is something that you don't see often in the media, how they depict Trinidad Carnival. There's a lot of traditional carnival celebrations that happens in Trinidad, but normally you just see the girls in the pretty and very sexy costumes. But they have the moko jumbies, they have the stick fighting, they have the dirty mask, they have the dam Lorraine. The traditional mask is actually really massive in Trinidad, but it's a shame that mainstream media doesn't cover that. They only cover the sexiness, and which is unfortunate because there's so many people that connect spiritually, especially to the traditional side. So Trinidad has both of that. But I will say that Guadeloupe, which is a French island, for those who may not be familiar, Guadeloupe's carnival is extremely authentic, especially if you want to connect to the African side of it, because they do not have sound systems. They do not have DJs on trucks. Everyone is drumming, or they have a shak and the conch shell, or the tabu, as we say. So, and then within that also, you are supposed to make your own costumes yourself. You're given a set of materials. A lot of the materials are very natural. So it would be certain like jute fabric or leaves or branches or shells. But everyone looks the same, and you paint your faces in certain ways that mean certain things. And there's specific chants as well, but it's extremely, extremely authentic. If you want to go to the roots of like authentic carnival, I would say Guadeloupe, but it depends on what you want. If you want to have go to good fetes and see all the bigger artists, and if you want to be drinking like Moe or Grey Goose in a fete, I guess that's Trinidad is for that. But if you want the authentic, more African experience, then I would say to go to Guadeloupe. Kieran, traditional, modern, they're both completely different feelings, aren't they? When you wear a traditional mass costume, you become anonymous for the most part because your face is covered. It involves a mask or some kind of something. So you become more anonymous, and I think you become the spirit of that character when you are in traditional mass. I feel now, because of modern costumes, and they're very elaborate and they're very beautiful, sometimes you may focus on more of how you look than actually becoming the character. And that is also a great feeling, because sometimes we want to be a goddess, sometimes I want to be an angel, sometimes I want to be I don't know, some winged Egyptian something, right? But it's the feelings are completely different. I think it would be really hard to say, because I think when you wear traditional mask costume, I almost feel like you become your ancestors when you wear it, because that's something you knew 100% that they used to do. And then the music is different. So yeah, I think it depends on what you're looking for. 100%, James. I do think that we need to have more traditional mass in Notting Hill, because I feel like Notting Hill the more that it grows, it becomes diluted. And I feel like, because we have 3 minutes left, I feel it becomes very diluted, and the whole message and the foundation of what Carnival came from and why it exists today, I think is extremely imperative for us to have that, because how else are we going to tell our stories? How else are we going to have this kind of spiritual and social expression if we do not have traditional masks? Otherwise, we're just going to be focused on looking pretty and taking selfies. And I think also to, the more that Carnival grows and you're seeing sound systems and people just come to spectate and not participate, it's just going to end up being a bunch of people on the road, like listening to music and drinking. And it needs to be more than that. Otherwise, it's going to lose its value, and traditional mass adds its value. Thank you. Well, I do workshops. UKON does workshops as well. They spend the whole summer doing workshops like this to kind of help bring that to as many people as possible, because I think it doesn't take away from your Carnival experience knowing its history. It adds to it, it embellishes it, and it's only going to make you love it more. It's not going to make you hate it. It's going to make you value it much more. So. Of course, it has to be part of the mainstream education. The Black curriculum is another body of educators who have been trying actively to do that. And the government is just not interested. In a nutshell, they're just like, yeah, nah, just have your Black History Month. So it definitely has to, because I think that, especially if you're part of the diaspora, Carnival is something you can connect to. That's the 2 days of the year that that's you, that's yours. And I think it would change the shape of Black Britain if we valued and knew what Carnival meant for us. Ooh, I don't know. I love Melissa Simon Hartman's costumes because she doesn't use feathers. She's extremely elaborate. She's been doing amazingly well. She designed for Black is King, Beyonce's Black is King, but she doesn't use feathers. So yeah, I anything Melissa Hartman. So we have 1 minute left, so I don't know if I should close off and say thank you guys for coming. Thank you for being here. And yeah.
Fiona, you was absolutely amazing.
Thank you. I talk a lot there.
You're so inspired, actually, and I've learned some new stuff today, honestly.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Thank you very much. Guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this talk today, and thank you so much to Fiona for joining us today. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.